I wouldn't call myself an pure investor. There's two elements to that. I'd probably more describe myself as an operator with benefits. It's probably a better depiction of what I get up to. For me, it's a human project. I really like supporting founders. So it's a sort of non-economic view. So there's companies that I'm working on that probably should have been shot long ago, but I really enjoy the founders and working with them. So I'm stuck one foot in each camp, right? I'm still active. I go into the businesses. I share my opinions. I annoy people, et cetera, on one hand. So I still have that operator angle. But I do have some money in the business, some skin in the game. But I sort of mix those two things up, which some people tell you is a bad idea. But as I said, for me, it's a human project, not an economic one.
Hey, Serge, welcome to the show. Great to have you, man. Thanks for making the time and jumping on the show.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
Great. I want to take you back to your early years and get to know you a little bit. So what inspired your journey into tech industry to begin with?
I studied organizational psych at uni and came out as an HR consultant. And I incidentally was working with tech companies doing HR work. And I thought the internet was being born in the late 90s. And I thought, shit, this internet thing's got legs. I think it might change the world. And so I did a startup with a mate of mine, which was a dismal failure. We were 30 years too early and we didn't know anything about technology. I was hooked on the transformational power of the internet and the change of business models and what tech could do and all of that stuff. And I was lucky that my first job, although it wasn't in tech, was in the tech industry and allowed me to change. And I convinced someone to take me on as a project manager, and then the rest is history, really.
Nice. And then what led your journey from there to MCOM?
The guys at MCOM are friends of mine from prior, and we talked about being in a business together. And we saw the mobile thing. MCOM is a mobile banking and payments business. So we sold a mobile banking platform to banks, tier one banks. And we thought this mobile thing's going to be big. So that was the next wave after sort of the internet. And we thought that people were going to want to do banking and payments on their phones. And everyone else thought that was a ridiculous idea. And I joined Graham, Adam and Ed in this business, MCOM. And it took us a little while to get off the ground because we're a bit ahead of our time. But we built a pretty successful business and really learned not just about tech and financial services, but also it's a SaaS model, really.
To Ricky and I now, you've done that big transition over from startup land, building your own big beast, and then transitioning over from operator to investor. For us, maybe, could you share some insights? What's the difference been? What do you enjoy about it? Because it is a slightly different rush from being on the tools component of the job.
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself a pure investor. There's two elements to that. I'd probably more describe myself as an operator with benefits. It's probably a better depiction of what I get up to. For me, it's a human project. I really like supporting founders. So it's a sort of non-economic view. So there's companies that I'm working on that probably should have been shot long ago, but I really enjoy the founders and working with them. So I'm stuck one foot in each camp, right? I'm still active. I go into the businesses. I share my opinions. I annoy people, et cetera, on one hand. So I still have that operator angle. But I do have some money in the business, some skin in the game. But I sort of mix those two things up, which some people tell you is a bad idea. But as I said, for me, it's a human project, not an economic one. And I guess you guys at Venturon are trying to do something similar. You're not only putting your money in, but actually getting in the weeds. And to me, that's the best of both worlds. Rather than going from operator to investor, you're going from operator to operator with benefits, or investor with some operating tentacles, or whatever I don't know what the term is, but
Have you copyrighted that? Because otherwise we're going to steal it. Operator with benefits. It's going to be all over our stuff everywhere. I feel like this. I'm the same. I don't think I could be a pure investor. I think it's in me. So something I could do. That's why I was keen if you had insights. But like operator with benefits, and we're going to use that for this whole podcast now. It's perfect, right? I don't have to be the person anymore. But you're taking other people on that journey, which I think is the most exciting, the best part of what we've all done is the journey, right? And now I look back and go, can I take 5 people on that journey? And so that, they're going to have the same stories and the same cool things that we did over time. And that's what's exciting.
Exactly. And if I had the choice today of 2xing my money over 3 years, or let's say 2xing my money over 5 years on a great adventure, or 5xing my money by standing on the sidelines, I'd pick the former every time. It's a stupid answer from an investor perspective, but the right answer at a human level.
Yeah. And look, I tell you what, you're going to get a hell of a lot more joy out of your 2x than your 5x, all right? There's only so much time you can sit alone by yourself and twiddle your thumbs.
That operations edge or operations with benefits edge, has that brought about conflict or internal conflict? You just mentioned you obviously would pick former every time, but Has there been some times where you're going, oh, geez, I should have just taken the money and run?
Not for me personally. I don't feel conflicted. I like the people I'm working with. But I do see that from time to time with investors, people who followed me into things and saying, you're just not doing the prudent economic thing. You're pursuing something a bit messier. And my answer is yes. And if you want someone else to be the investor director, feel free. But that's my choice. So I have had a little bit of conflict with certain investors. Most of them are understanding, but I get it. Some people just put in the money for the returns, and there's your director who's not driving things in that direction.
So just to switch up the gear, you're obviously very passionate about New Zealand SaaS scene and Wellington in particular. So can you share some of the things that you're really interested and excited about as we move to the next phase?
I think the cloud delivery models, call it SaaS, in the context of our conversation, is a real unlock, right? Because New Zealand just has no domestic market. And historically, you almost couldn't build a domestic software business. There's probably 3 or 4 exceptions like accounting software, but the reality is it was just not possible. And their cloud models just unlocked that. And so it is a real game changer for New Zealand. Like even Australia has a much bigger market where you can build a domestic business. New Zealand just simply doesn't have the scale. So I'm really excited. I'm particularly excited about verticalized SaaS and particularly verticalized for small businesses. So things you guys understand well, like Tradeify or Timely for hairdressers. They're targeting a vertical. So they're the system of record for verticals, and hairdressers, I wouldn't know, I don't even hear, but I assume hairdressers in New Zealand do the same thing to hairdressers in Australia, to the same thing in the Netherlands or wherever you choose, right? So the vertical thing's very universal. And if you're selling to small businesses, they don't really care where you are, right? If you're a hairdresser and your software works and it does the thing on the tin and it does it well and you get good support, then wherever you are, location's indifferent. Whereas enterprise software, even if the SaaS delivery model is good, people still want to see you, strangle you from time to time, and so on. And so that being remote is less of a disadvantage in that context.
You touched on some really good points, and the major one being that Kiwi companies have to go overseas. They have to expand globally. One of the things that we most often talk about is go-to-market strategy, getting that right from day one. What are some of the common pitfalls that you've come across, Sergio, where companies just don't get that right in the first place, particularly for the Kiwi companies?
I'd say in terms of a behavior, I think the ideal customer profile is still somehow a dark art. Like to me, is when you're looking at the world, there's lots of hairdressers. I don't know anything about hairdressers, but if you're building a business, you know exactly the kind of hairdresser you're going after. They've got more than 2 salons, they sell product, whatever, right? So the ideal customer profile thing is really important. Otherwise, every market is too big, too messy, and too difficult to tackle. So that mistake, not understanding your ideal customer profile, I see that mistake being made over and over again. And a lot of companies are still born on the back of it. They've serviced. You'll meet a 1 million ARR business with 6 different verticals or 6 different segments. You're like, geez, that's bound to not get anywhere. That's probably the first and most important one. The other one, which I think affects go-to-market, is not understanding the derived economic value for your customers. Again, if I'm selling hairdresser software to hairdressers, what do they think the economic value is of our product? And a lot of the time I'll sit in a room with someone and say, how would your customer describe the economic value of your product? And I get a lot of blank stares. And I think that has all sorts of impacts around who you distribute, what your pricing model should be, what level of success fees you should have, all of that stuff. So I think that's at the activity level. And then at the process level, I think that experimental mindset is often missing in go-to-market strategies. Before you formulate a go-to-market strategy, you can go and test all sorts of things, whether that's pricing, distribution model, country, segment, whatever. And I just think once people got a bit of traction, they go, oh, we're going to stop experimenting. And my view is you can keep experimenting for a pretty long time before you lock in your go-to-market model.
I think, and you can test and retest, right? Just because you're successful at scaling really fast and this didn't work 5 years ago when you did it, doesn't mean it's not going to work now. I've fallen into that trap before running a large business, and we're like, we've done this before, it doesn't work, but it might work now, and it might work with different people and different energy sitting behind it. So it's not locking a door, I think, is something I learned later on in my journey.
Yeah, it's a great one. And I think the door analogy, the one way and 2-way doors kind of thing, like this time, we can open the door now, but we can open it later. It's okay as well. And just retaining the experimental mindset for sure.
Hey, on the flip side, some of the brands that you mentioned earlier obviously have cracked the code. They've done wonderfully well. They've gone on the global scene. So what have you noticed with them that they've done so successfully well in order to get past that 5 or even 10 million ARR stage?
Repeatability is the obvious answer. So they figured out something that's repeatable and scalable. In some ways, it's a very simplistic, amateur answer. Probably you could have asked ChatGPT, it'd probably tell you that. But I do think it's different. I don't think there's sort of common viewpoints. Again, ICP, absolutely. So understand the sweet spot of the ideal customer profile, left-handed redheads who drive Japanese cars and also own a fishing boat. Like that can be a very narrow ICP. And so I do think that's definitely a big part of the answer. And certainly early on, a lot of experimentation, feedback loops, data-driven feedback loops, I'd say is definitely in common. And brand building, but I mean that at the community level, not at the big flashy ads, but actually just really engaged at scale with their ideal customer profile, their market.
That's a pro tip. One of the other things that we often talk about is building up your leadership team and transitioning from founder-led sales or marketing or product to a team that you mentioned repeatable. Any tips there, Serge? Because that's what we often find is where a lot of them tend to trip up.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. My working hypothesis on that is Dunbar's number. Not sure if you guys are familiar with Dunbar, which is the sort of ideal human village is 125 to 150 people. That's how many concurrent relationships any adult human can sustain. And so when you're approaching the 100-person mark, which in typically a growing SaaS company is around the $10 million ARR mark, that's when the CEO, founder cannot have direct relationships with everybody and then needs to build process and governance mechanisms around the organization. And that's when they either want to sell or they figure they need to upgrade the leadership team, including themselves quite often. It's often the founder who says, actually, I don't want to be doing that job or I'm not that good at it. So I typically think around when a company's approaching the 100-person mark, I think Dunbar's number, there's a legitimate anthropological reason why that's a big step change. And that's when you really have to think hard about it. It is a difficult process. And certainly New Zealand companies very often sell before they hit that point for that reason. And it is often a pity because they have so much headroom, as you guys will know from your Simpro experience.
Well, I love trying to remember 825 people's names and families and what they did and things like that. It is hard. That's the thing. Once you get past 100, having that dedicated personal relationship is virtually impossible. And it's a huge part of time that you got to put into is trying to make sure that you can still connect at least there's some sort of level when you're at that sort of scale, because it can't be what you were when you were 100 people. You just can't.
Yeah. And some founders love it, by the way, and that's great. But
Yeah.
many go, this is not the thing I set out to do. And that's okay.
I was going to ask you a follow-up question to that, because a lot of the founders would suggest or tend to think to themselves that they can, to Sean's point, they can remember 800 people and their families and their dogs and cats. Does that bring about some level of conflict when it comes to board members and founders, and how should they structure the team and bring in horses for courses, so to speak? When should you bring the next layer of VP in or SVP? Do you get into those kind of discussions with the businesses you're involved in?
Yeah, of course, it's part of the narrative. And again, when you start to reach the 100-person mark, that's typically when it all surfaces. Again, I'm founder-led, so I support the founder. I don't tell them, which might be bad governance, which is you now must have an executive team that looks like this. But you can recognize the problems. You can talk to people about, hey, it seems like there's a lot of stuff that isn't getting done. Is it because you don't want to do it? Is it because you don't enjoy it anymore, etc.? So it is part of the process, and it is hard to break through quite often because I think all of our idols from a startup perspective, not just in the SaaS world, they are founders who've made it all the way through, right? Everyone wants to be Elon Musk. He's clearly broken the 100-person mark over and over again. And so you want to be that guy, which is fine, but only a small minority are like that, right? Most companies in the world that are successful are not run by their founders, and that's fine.
And yeah, it's a giant executive team doing all the day-to-day stuff underneath so he can be the face of what goes on. So you can build that too if that's what you're interested in. I'm interested, as I'll let Ricky will talk about Kiwi startups all day otherwise. If you think about what we we're just talking about, where do you see the main misalignment between founders and investors? And being that you're in particular founder-led, founder side, I'm guessing you've got a pretty good unique perspective of where it generally gets that bit of friction started, because it's generally, it's a relationship like any other. There's going to be some friction.
Yeah, I don't have a general answer because it does depend. Some founders are so respectful of the third-party money they took in, they just feel guilty and will eat noodles for breakfast, lunch and dinner because they feel like they can't be spending their investors' money and whatever. And some are just like, who cares about the investors? They're just leeches. They're just riding the coattails of my greatness. So you do get the spectrum of different perspectives on that. I think the best mechanism, and it often only comes out way too late, is a founder charter. And I've done this with 3 or 4 businesses where we go, here is the journey that you want to go on as a founder. Think that, and here's the things that are important to you and all of that stuff. And then if investors come along, you've got this artifact to say, just that we're not selling this business in 3 years. I had an AGM yesterday, and we've got 2 M&A inquiries on the go at the moment, but I made it very clear to shareholders that there was no intention of selling the business, right? And if they have different views, that's okay. But as it stands, the de facto position is we're not selling the business. And you've got to have clarity so that I don't get in 3 months' time or 6 months' time, some investor going, I need to get my money out because I'm divorcing my wife or I want to buy a beach house or whatever it happens to be. And you're like, it sucks to be you,
Yeah.
That's not what we're doing here. So I just think clarity, and often, most of the time, it's not there up front. It only happens when a founder leaves a business or something bad happens, and then, maybe we should get down on paper what our intention is.
That the clarity and making sure everyone's on the same page, right? If you're on the same page, you can have hard discussions. You can have tricky and difficult things occur because everyone knows exactly where they stand. You can actually deal with it and work through it rather than dancing around in the background trying to figure out what's going to happen.
And again, I'm clear most of the time I'm supporting the founders to achieve their thing. And my job is to make sure it's on paper and well understood. Even if you disagree, that's okay. You're allowed to disagree, but I'm just telling you what.
Hey, is there much hangover from the unicorn years of 2021, 2022, where people were just going, I'm going to 20x this thing and I'll be out in 2 years with $500 million in my pocket? And has that brought about a lot of notable mistakes from founders as well as investors? And are you living through any of that?
Yeah, so there's the pain and benefits comes in different ways. First one is almost everyone knows it's going to be harder to get capital, or is harder already. And so having to reduce costs materially. So most of the companies I work with have reduced costs in one way or another. The reverse side of that is founders on average are remembering how much they enjoy working with smaller teams. And there's a real human casualty of cutting costs and severing jobs and all of that stuff, which is terrible to execute and terrible to be the recipient of. But on the other hand, most founders are like, oh man, now that I've got less people to manage, I have so much more time on my hands. I can focus more on product or go to market or whatever it happens to be. So I see it as a 2-edged sword there, Ricky, which as on one hand has been tough medicine, and you have to accept that you're not going to get the valuations or that you're going to have to get a bit leaner for a while. But on the other hand, rediscovering why most people got into it, which is to work with a small group of people in a really dynamic way to achieve outsized outcomes and back to basics. And to be honest, notwithstanding the human cost of it, I personally, it just resonates more with me because that's how I want to work.
You're not getting 15x term sheets anymore. We're like, oh, I've gone down. I thought we were 25 times. Now we're only 15. We've moved with the market.
Exactly. So, and there are also unreasonable things being tabled, which is, the market sucks. So you should take this thing. And you're like,
it's $1.
Yeah, exactly. There's a bit of that, which is pretty difficult to deal with. But as I said, you end up building better businesses on the back of it. So I think we'll look back on this period as 21 and 22 was anomalous and silly. You didn't build great businesses then. You might have had outsized exits, but in 23 and 24, and focused on building sustainable businesses with real focus.
Everyone is effectively around the world is defaulting back to building businesses like we do in ANZ, right? So you make money, like making money is important. Make some money. We're probably one of the only ones who grew pretty rapidly, but we're always making money because I felt weird about not making money. I used to get yelled at more about the fact that we're making money than losing money. It's just, I'm like you, it's more in my wheelhouse. Everyone's building proper, sustainable, replicatable businesses that are making money, that are good sized businesses. They're adding bodies when they need to add bodies, not because it's a race to get how many bodies on you can get because talent is short. I agree with you. We'll look back and go, geez, those 2 years are weird.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing you just pointed out, which is implicit there, was international capital is coming more in our direction just because of the capital efficiency of Australasian businesses. So I think long term, that's going to be pretty healthy.
Yeah, 100%. And we were lucky. We got a lot of we're all international money, and we had super good partners who I never got pressured to be what everyone else is, and you must be spending way more money. There was lots of suggestions, but never pressure. And I think that stood us in good stead, right? When things did get tougher, that's how we run our business already. I think we'll see more and more people looking down here to New Zealand and to Australia too, going, there's a lot of amazing things being built here.
And human capital, right? It's being recognized again. Because at one point, man, everyone was just blowing their team up to 1,000 or 2,000 just because it felt good. That's what the definition of scaling had become. It
About
was
people.
like, what's
Yeah.
about people? Who's on your payroll? How many people have you got? It was never about dollar in or 5 out or whatever it was. So,
And I have to admit, in a couple of instances, I fell into that trap, tagged along rather than instigated it. But I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, let's hire 10 more people to do that without thinking, is this thing worth doing in the first place? And do we really need 10 people to do it?
Instigated, 100%. Definitely did that a couple of times.
yeah. Yeah. There'll be another podcast just about that, I think.
That's right, mate. You learn from your mistakes. It's okay if you
Yeah.
make them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Learned it the hard way too. Maybe coming back to some tips and advice, Serge, what advice would you have given to your younger self when you actually then made the switch from operation to and being an investor? When you roll back all the years, what's that top 2 or 3 lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, the first one was I had a little pie chart that said, when I was looking at things, the product, market size, team, and timing, usual sort of model, and sort of 25% each. That was my weighting for evaluating things. And I'm just 80 to 90% team and 5 to 20%, that's bad maths, 10 to 20% size of market. But most markets are big enough, right? You guys are construction. Is construction market big? Yes. Is tourism market big? Yes. Is there lots of hairdressers in the world? Yes. You just tick that box. You don't really think about it too deeply because there's lots of them. And then the rest is just the team. And so advice to my former self would be just, it's all about the team. And most people, all the mistakes I've made have been because I got distracted by this product's amazing, or this market opportunity is amazing, or the timing tailwind is definitely here. From my perspective, they're all red herrings. The only thing that matters is the team. Team will pivot, find the space, are resilient enough to push through. Doesn't really matter whether they got competitors, whatever. You'll find the right team will find a way. And I'm sure that resonates with you guys. So that's definitely by far the biggest advice.
At least you ticked off our thesis, so I feel better about myself now, so that's good.
There's lots of things I wish I'd known or educated myself on. Anything from ESOPs, I'd had exposure to one set of ESOPs and I thought that's the way you do it. There's 100, turns out there's 100 ways to do it. So there's technical skills and knowledge, but you can only accumulate it through doing, really. And I wish I'd known them, but there was only one way to learn them, really.
Everything you said, that if you're a founder-led investor, right? You've spent a lot of time with founders and obviously you sit alongside them pretty closely. For founders entering this scene and starting to look at investors and stuff, do you have any guidance or tips or things that they should be looking out for? Because it's tough, right? You come in, especially now it's a difficult market, but there's still a lot of money floating around. So you're still getting a lot of people coming and knocking on your door. Do you have any tips for people on what they should do, look for, talk to?
Yeah, again, it's a human project. Take really seriously who you're getting in bed with. It's harder to get out of an investor relationship than it is a marriage.
True.
I know this because I've exited a marriage and it was a lot easier than these investment things I've seen. And just take it really seriously and do your due diligence and then make sure you can answer the question of, would you love to work with these people? I'm involved in one company where we had a term sheet from a prominent VC. And we were about to sign it, and the founder calls me and says, to be honest, I really hate these people because of the DD process has been so painful. And I'm like, mate, you're going to be these guys are going to be on your board and demanding information and working with you and showing up to your office every month for the rest of your professional life. If you already don't like them, this is a very bad idea. And I pulled the pin on that. And I think that was brave of him because it actually created quite a lot of downstream consequences. But it's to take the people you get into bed with very seriously. I think that's the most important thing. And it's chemical as well. It's a human project. These are people you got to love working with, right?
100%. Do a test, right? Go have a beer with these people. And if all you can talk about is the deal you're about to do and there's nothing else to say, not a great sign. Got to be able to have a laugh. You've got to be able to enjoy yourself a bit because it's a long journey. It's a hard journey. No matter who you get on your team, it's not easy. There's pitfalls and difficulties and you got to work on that. I love it. I think it's great advice.
So just want to dig a bit deeper there. So we've been speaking to a bunch of founders and the new CEOs. A lot of them find it taxing. Like obviously raising funds is not an easy task. You've still got your day job. You've got your young family to look after. But most of them just want to go back to doing what they love, which is building stuff.
Yeah.
Any tips or advice there, mate? I know, as Sean mentioned, there's a bunch of money floating around, but a lot of them don't actually know the source. A lot of them actually don't know how to do the pitch deck, don't know how to collate the information. And beer test, as much as we love it, They may not. For people like us, we can down 10 or 20, no problems. But for them, it's you've just stolen 2 hours away from me and I've still got work to do.
Yeah. The first thing, I'm a sales guy, as you are, Ricky, qualifying. Right. The killer question is, when was the last time you invested in a company like us? And if the answer is never, pretty strong signal they're not buying, right? Whereas they can go, I invested in company A, B, C, which is quite similar to yours, and this is what we did, and this is what we learned. You're like, okay, we're having an adult conversation now. So I think the art of qualification seems to be missing. And I think pitching is a ridiculous thing, by the way. Like you guys, again, you're salespeople, you don't pitch. You don't go to customers, here's what we do, here's the price point, here's the whatever. By that stage, someone's hung up on you. By the time your 7 minutes are done, you're like, you have questions that you ask the prospect to understand whether or not your product and proposition makes sense for them. And that is true for investment. So I think qualification is really important. And then related to that is being deliberate. I always say to people, find the 20 people who are best positioned to understand the market opportunity that you're addressing. Make that list of 20. Don't come and talk to me again until you've made that list and you've put against each name why they are really well qualified to assess your opportunity. And there's this kind of misnomer in the market, I think, that dumb money is easy to find, right? You just find someone who's rich enough and stupid enough to believe your PowerPoint and the hockey stick, and they'll put in money. Most people who got rich didn't do it by being stupid, and smart people don't believe hockey sticks. So there's a little bit of a sort of cross here. So yeah, my advice is always make the list of top 20, and then it's a qualification game. Qualify out. It's okay to say it doesn't sound like it's a fit, right? Yeah.
That's such a good point, right? Because we've been talking to so many and they're like, oh, I'm going to go pitch to these VCs for the next 5 days straight. I want to wait for everything else that washes out before I talk to you again. It's okay, good to you. But do you know who you're pitching to? Do you know what they're going to ask for? Are you willing to give up 40% to someone just because they're going to throw some money at you? What are you going to do with the money? A lot of them don't even know what they're going to do.
That's my favorite question. What are you going to do with the money? I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? You're going to raise money. What are you going to do with it? Where's it going? Oh, I need to operate for another 6 months. I'm like, so you're just taking money to survive for 6 months. That's your pitch. Good luck with that.
So I guess moving forward, none of us have a crystal ball in front of us, but what does the outlook look like? Back end of 2024, do you see the market picking back up? Is it going to lay where it is for the next couple of years? Any guidance on that?
I think Kalai's systems of record, industry-specific SaaS solutions like you guys at Simpro, Traderfly, Timely, those kind, I think that will only accelerate as more and more of these industries digitize. It seems like an obvious thing to say, but I think that's pretty safe. So I see that unchanged. So if I look at the companies I work with, all of those who are verticalized SaaS have had no impact in their sales volume in the last 12 months. It's business as usual. Horizontal or technical solutions are quite different. They've been affected by all sorts of things. And of course, the big moderator there is AI. No one knows how all of this stuff is going to shake out. It's just a massive arms race. And so the safest refuge is verticalization, in my view. Having said that, obviously, there's going to be a whole lot of unicorns born out of the AI craze that's going on right now. In terms of markets recovering, I just think we're just going to go back to the mean, right, of healthy, viable businesses that are somewhat capital efficient and are very clear on their proposition and market. And I suspect 24 will be that. I think in terms of sort of functional changes in the way SaaS companies sell, I think it's the end of the road for the brute force sales methods, the art account exec stuff. I think it's the end of the road for AdWords and SEO, etc. I think AI and data structures and all of this stuff is really changing how you market and sell. So I do see 24, on one hand, the general markets, I think will go back to mean, but I think the methods by which we go to market in these SaaS companies will fundamentally change in the next 12 months.
Can you touch on that a bit further? You mentioned about the two-step process, so SDR, AE, that's going to significantly change, but what about marketing play?
Yeah, so if you think about how it works today, broadly speaking, you put a whole lot of money in Google Ads and you put some content out there in the form of blogs and podcasts like this one and whatever, and 1,000 people come to your website, 10 people try your product, 2 of them you're convinced to have it, and you used a mixture of outbound calling and demos and onboarding and all of that stuff. I just think that playbook is up for a bit of turmoil because of just ultimately speaking AI. You can personalize experiences. You can have a lot more information about your customer, your prospect before they come through the door, right? So I come through the door and they'll know it's Serge Van Dam who lives here, who has this job, has this income, banks with this bank and whatever. And the experience is going to be vastly different to you're just another person who hit our website. So I think there's a sort of transitionary period that we're going to go through in the next 24 months. And I think
Probably the reverse. So people are going to go, I want to buy this software, and they're going to plug stuff into something, and AI is going to go, these are the 3 software that can solve your problem. And all of a sudden it's completely different, right? It's not just going in AdWords or what I see. It's going to be driven by a machine.
yeah, that's a great assessment. And I don't know exactly how it's going to pan out, but I think we're going to look back in 2029. We'll say, geez, 2024 was the year where the whole traditional SaaS playbook was munched up, put in the blender, and out came this other thing. And I don't know what it's going to be called. It's not going to be called inbound marketing. It's not going to be called content marketing. It's not going to be called SDR, outbound. It's going to be something. AI assisted, deep, automated sales model or something. That's a bad thing to put an acronym to, but yeah, something like that.
You watch, mate. 2029, we'll look back and we'll see in this podcast the 3 CEOs who started these things and have all watched this podcast, stolen our idea and your acronym and taken it and run. So what's going to
I
happen?
hope that's the case. I hope that's the case.
They each give us a percentage. We're all good.
Hey, you did mention about AI, obviously, but human connections are never going to be replaced. So moving forward, do you still find that field marketing will have a part to play in the playbook, or is that dead and buried too?
Yeah, so I think the role of physical communities will increase. I think the role of events will get more marketing. I think all of those things are true. People craved physical events. I ran a SaaS party here in June in Wellington, and we thought we'd have 150 people, and we had 350 people come, and we sold out because the venue couldn't take any more. There were people spilling onto the street. You know, why? Not just because I organize good parties, but because people crave that person-to-person connection. A lot of people working from home, some or all of the time, blah, blah, blah. So I totally agree with you. I just think it's going to be different. And I think the best SaaS companies are going to do it through community building, community events. And I think that's going to be the model rather than trying to harass you into a meeting or onboard you when all you have to do, again, send your spreadsheet of data to ChatGPT at Automatic or whatever the equivalent will be, automatically sorts it out and ingests it, and it's already sitting there in your SimPro account. I didn't really need you didn't really need a human for that bit, but you still crave human connection. So what kind of human connection are you going to have? And I think it's going to be less onboarding and more something else.
Oh, that community, that social media selling presence, it's already beginning, right? People are shifting to community generation sales and using social proof a lot more than they did 4 years ago, where we just had word sale. I think that transition is definitely advanced in its movement.
We can move to the quick
Best
fire round.
questions.
Yeah, absolutely. These are the most exciting ones. Favorite movie, Serge, of all time?
Gloomy Sunday, which is as gloomy as the title sounds, but I had great-grandparents die in concentration camps, and it just really struck a chord. And then relevant to the SaaS podcast, it's the ultimate in playing the long game. For anyone who's seen it, Gloomy Sunday, phenomenal movie.
Yeah, note it down. Favorite activity with kids?
Tramping for me, but they're not really that interested in it, so I like it. But
So they watch you from the sideline?
they come along, but reluctantly, so it's good. I enjoy it. Pretending we have a band is probably my favorite activity. One of my sons is very good at musical. The other one is on his way. I'm terrible, but I love jamming along with him, so that's probably it.
And then to recover from the tramping session, what drink are you leaning towards?
I do actually love water, to be honest. It sounds I'm the world's most boring person, but I'm partial to the occasional hoppy Pilsner as well, or a spice rum too.
I think water's got 2 votes so far. You're not alone. Don't worry.
Yeah.
There's been a few waters.
Someone said sparkling. Someone added sparkling.
So sparkling is fancy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, awesome. I know you love to travel too, Serge. Any favorite place to visit?
So to be honest, I'm a Buddhist in inclination, so I'm just happy anywhere in nature. I don't really, I don't have cravings to be somewhere, anywhere where nature is present. So I'm happy. In terms of my happy place, I live in Wellington, so the Tararuas I love. And then closer to home, I love mountain biking and Waimapihi or Pole Hill here. But again, it's just because I'm out in nature more than anything.
Nice.
Most important question.
Most important. You go, mate.
So the most important questions is pretty much what we've designed the whole podcast around. Peanut butter, crunchy or smooth?
Smooth, definitely. But I'm also, it can't be salted. That's terrible.
Unsalted smooth.
Yeah, and then ideally with a little bit of honey or something sweet on top. I'm controversial there, but yeah,
100%. I'm like, a minute ago, you're like, oh, I'm all about being in nature and everything. And then you're like, I want to crush my nuts up into a blended taste of nothing. That doesn't make any sense. It's a contradiction.
Yeah. Oh, I'm such a complicated person.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Hey, this has been fun. Thank you once again, Serge, for hopping on the show.
Oh, thanks for
Thanks,
having me.
mate.
It's been fun too. Yeah.